Hello and welcome. Today we are doing a daxos deck, which is built as a core deck, so the second level of deck building in brackets. It will also have a budget of $50, so you can also use this as a sort of renewed precon. Of course, Daxos was already in a precon, so he should lend himself to this. I got this idea from another viewer, Kari Rifari, not sure what that means, who said for like 3 days they were building a Daxos to Returned deck intended for bracket 2. Problem is that they ended up building it way too expensive, and I get that because it is very hard to make a deck with such a strict budget, but I did try it for myself. Yeah, of course I am looking at it today. As promised, we will also do a deck tech on it. So Daxos is, I think, a very interesting commander still, because he wants to work with going wide a little bit, but not too much on his own. And then he has a fixed enchantment basis. So Daxos says whenever you cast an enchantment, you get an experience counter. These don't go away in any sense, so you can keep building those. Even when Daxos is removed, your experience counters will stay around. So if he is removed, you can play him again later and you will start at, let's say, 5 experience counters if you had 5 enchantments enter the battlefield previously. Then for 3 mana, you can put a spirit enchantment creature token onto the battlefield, which is not casting it, so it doesn't work for the experience counters. But it has this creature's power and toughness are equal to the number of experience counters you have. Other thing you can do is get experience counters from other creatures, but usually you are trying to make more enchantments here and make sure that Daxos grows his experience counters in that manner, so that you can put a bunch of big creatures out onto the battlefield. But that is not winning yet. I also want to talk a bit about the lore of Daxos, because I think it ties in really well with the deck, and I want you to know what kind of deck you are playing and if it's something that you like flavorfully. So Daxos was an oracle working for the sun god of Theros. But before all that, from his early youth on, Daxos was a very silent boy who would often sit alone and had this obsession, which was the sun. His mother thought this was weird because he only got out into the sun to go look at the sun. So his mother tried to cure him, which is not something recommended. If your child does this, this might just be normal. Or perhaps, well, it is just making him special. So don't cure him. Look at him like the boy he is. That's what I'd say. But okay. She tried to do this, so she brought him to the god of passage, almost into death, which is a little bit extreme. But she brought him to Athreos, and he saw Daxos' ability to be an oracle for all gods at once, which is very special on Theros, because usually oracles are just that for one god. So Athreos tried to get Daxos, but his mother saved him by sacrificing herself, seeing that Daxos in fact was just talented and not something to be cured. So eventually Daxos got brought in by the sun god Heliod, who now easily got to take him for himself. Probably he'd been luring Daxos in since youth, but what we see in Daxos the Returned is him trying to get out of Death's grasp. Because later, while being friends with Elspeth, he got actually killed by her because she was trying to beat Phyrexian Obliterator, but accidentally killed Daxos because it was all an illusion. So what we are seeing here is him, well, not only being sad, his mask does sort of reflect that, but this is how all of the Returned on Theros look. These are people who got into hell or the Death's grasp, and now are trying to get out. So he's also becoming one of the leaders for those spirits who are trying to get back to life, who all have something that they while few is left unfinished. So Daxos now gets stronger with every enchantment played, because enchantments and gods are gods and boons on Theros. So then Daxos takes the other spirits with him out of the realm, taking the lead for them to follow him. That's why the spirits he takes with him get strengthened from his experience counters. He learns from the gods and teaches the other spirits and shares the god's strength with those other spirits as he climbs up back towards his love. And eventually he sort of does. But that is a bit of a spoiler, isn't it? But not really. So how does the deck look? Well, we have Daxos the Returned, who wants to work with enchantments and wants to work with going white. So he is making tokens and we want to help him make more tokens. So one thing we have here is the usual types of themes. We have ramp. Usually I say go with 10 ramp cards. For ramp, I think this is the most expensive part of the deck. Usually, or one of the most at least, usually in Orzhov, it is pretty hard to get ramp out, because with green you have a bunch of resources, but in white and black this is not really the color for you. So I have cards like Archaeomancer's Map, which will help you get that ramp that you need. So Archaeomancer's Map says when it enters the battlefield, you search your library for up to 2 basic plains cards. You reveal them, put them into your hand, then shuffle. So they are in your hand, but that is not ramp yet. Ramp needs you to help you put those lands into play as well, which it also does. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under an opponent's control, if that player controls more lands than you, you put a land card from your hand onto the battlefield. Now, $3 doesn't seem like a lot of money at first, but if you want to play this as a sort of precon that you can easily get for your friends, for example, it is a lot if you see the budget of $50. So in any deck, you will have a bunch of lands. I personally always go with 38 lands. Why? Because that means that you get more than 50% of a chance to get 3 lands into your hand, which is basically the golden standard for your first hand. And you only have 25% chance of a chance to get 4, which will sort of lessen the value of your hand. So that's why 38. But these 38 lands should approximately cost $5 in any deck. Now you are in a 2-color deck here, so white and black. So that means that you need to spend a little bit less even on lands. But let's calculate with $5 for lands, then you have $45 left for 62 cards, which means you have 73 cents per card left. So $3 for a card in this deck is pretty expensive, but as I said, I want to focus on the ramp. We also have Soul Ring, which is a little bit more expensive, and then we have a bunch of ones that are under $1, which should help lower the curve of money that we are spending. But this is very important here because you need enough money to play Daxos and play your board wipes. Board wipes, I always have 5, except for in decks where board wipes are not necessary or helpful at all. So here we have 5. These are usually pretty basic, but here we have some that also allow you to choose certain modes, which can help you, for example, just choose creatures or just choose artifacts if you need it. So I really like those. Also, if you can choose 2, you can, for example, choose to destroy all creatures with mana value 4 or greater or something, and Daxos won't be hit. So I really like those. And then also you have, for example, Extinguish All Hope, which is 6 mana, which is really expensive usually for a board wipe, but again, we are in a budget deck, but only destroys all non-enchantment creatures. So you will at least be left with the board and your opponents probably won't. So card draw, board wipes, ramp, we talked about a little bit, lands, those are the usual things you need. And also removal, I usually put in 10 cards. Now, if you are in a more competitive state, you will need more removal and interaction. But here 10 is okay. For example, the expensive ones I have are, for example, Darksteel Mutation, which is 2 mana for an enchantment that is also a sort of removal. It makes a 0/1 out of a creature and gives it indestructible. Really good on a commander, because then they won't be able to get it back. If you destroy a commander, of course, they can play it again. But if you turn it into a 0/1, they can't play that commander. Well, not yet. Now we are getting into the more unique themes for this deck. So, for example, I have found that it is very easy to get a bunch of recursion in this deck. That is because many enchantments are very good as recursion pieces, and that means that they have gotten very low costed in dollars. So for example, Kaya's Ghost form is one that you can put on a creature, and then when it dies later or is put into exile, you return the card to the battlefield under your control. You only lose the enchantment, but you don't lose the creature. That's just one example, but there are multiple. And then there's also cards like Crystal Chimes that help you return all enchantment cards from your graveyard, for example here, to your hand, which also helps you. Then there's some other protection, which I really like, because then it will help you keep Daxos around for that enchantment experience counter to ramp up. Other than that, I have cards that get stronger from enchantments. It was really easy to get this filled up too. So for example, we have Boon of the Spirit Realm, which is 5 mana for an enchantment that also has a sort of ability like Daxos, where it triggers whenever another enchantment enters the battlefield under your control. Because then you get a blessing counter on the Boon of the Spirit Realm, which gives +1/+1 to each creature for every blessing counter on it. So every enchantment you play, your creatures will grow again, sort of doubling the ability of Daxos. I really like these cards that sort of, again, double what your commander does, because sometimes your commander can get very important for your deck, like here, and then it is sometimes better to have another type of card like an enchantment that will help you do the same thing. Also have Celestial Ancient, which says whenever you play an enchantment, put a +1 counter on each creature you control. Of course, that isn't as sticky as an enchantment, but does help you a lot, because the creatures will stay as strong even if it is removed. And for example, Catilda Dawnheart Martyr, which is a bit new, but I really like this one because it gets as big as the amount of spirits and or enchantments you have. Of course, something being a spirit and an enchantment only counts once. But there are more things like All That Glitters, which has been very popular in Standard for a longer time, which is an enchantment that you can put on a creature to get this effect for growing +1/+1 for every enchantment you control. So I like these effects because they help you get a very big creature that needs to be blocked. Now, what you also will need is something that will help you go wide, or that works really well with going wide, because on accident you will be going very well wide with this deck, and you will have a sort of token sub-theme that you can already start building even on a budget. I like doing this because later on this will become more important as you start upgrading Daxos as a deck. So we have cards like Archon of Sun's Grace, which gets you a 2/2 flyer with every enchantment that enters under your control. Another thing is, for example, Sigil of the Empty Throne, which whenever an enchantment enters, or whenever you cast an enchantment, you create a 4/4 angel with flying. There are more examples like this that create tokens whenever an enchantment enters. So because there are so many, I chose to make this a sub-theme as well. And then there's only one card that actually benefits from it, which is Intangible Virtue, which will give your creatures +1/+1 and Vigilance, which will really help because your spirit tokens, for example, then will be able to attack and block, which will make it a lot easier to actually attack in with them, which you will need to do a lot with this deck, because on a budget it will be very hard to get forms of unblockable as well, so you need to be ready to attack and defend. And that was it for this deck tag. Short and sweet, I'd say. And with that, I'd like to thank you for watching, and let me know if there's something else you'd like to see, like for example an upgrade video for Daxos. with that, I'd like to thank you for watching again. So have a nice day. Bye.